talks about. One of the things I thought about while I was sitting here, and I saw that, and it's like the second or third time in the last few weeks, I saw that 62% of millennials split if they're not happy, and I'm glad to hear I'm a millennial. But as you think about that, do you really think there's a such thing as a perfect customer experience? I know that's an open-ended question, and I have my thoughts, but your thoughts?
I guess I'm going first. I'm not sure there's necessarily a perfect customer experience. The biggest challenge that we all see is that you have different segments and different times of your life that you're communicating with. Certainly the millennials, which I technically do fall into, they're not all bad. Yeah, they're not all bad, and a lot of the feedback and research that's being done, it's just a difference of opinion, and I think the millennials are also split, but the perfect customer experience is going to vary drastically by generation, by segment, and by document type as well. So the marketing communication and that journey versus a notice or disclosure being sent out is going to be completely different. So I don't think there's a perfect customer experience. Anybody agrees or disagrees?
I would actually agree. I think customer experience is sort of that never-ending process, and there's always room for improvement. So several years ago, we probably didn't have the channels available to us that we do now, and what are we going to have available to us in the next 10 years, right? So there's always something to strive for as far as customer experience. And so I would definitely agree with what you said, that it's sort of open-ended, and we can strive to give the best experience as possible, keeping in mind the different generations. I mean, my dad was an IT guy, and he still wants his paper statement, but he will get that statement and go online to his bank and pay his bills. And now he has a new smartphone, and I'm scared because every once in a while I hear, "Okay, Google," and I thought, oh gosh. So now he's dangerous. But then, the first text message I got from my mother was all one string. There were no spaces in between, though she's gotten much better at that now. But seriously, I think understanding the generational preferences and how they can change, right? You can't assume that the silent generation, if you will, or the older generations are always going to want paper. They may be using Amazon Alexa or voice assistant technology and whatever. And then there's somebody like me who kind of falls in the middle between the older and younger generations. I'm not revealing my age, so don't ask. I like to get a paper document specifically because if it's a bill, I know it's on the counter and I need to pay it. But yet there are other experiences where I prefer it to be digital. So how do you create the perfect experience when it could be all over the map, right? So that's just my opinion.
Thank you. So when I think about this, I think about if you're providing a service or a product, your best customer experience is when you only hear from your customer when they're happy. So that would be your best customer experience. And obviously we know what the other side of the coin is, where people start to ditch you as a vendor or a provider. And I think that in focus with that, whether it is because you're a millennial or a baby boomer or whoever, I think that's the first thing that you have to put into the forefront of your mind. How do I want to interact with this customer, and how do I get them to evoke positive response when I do have interaction with them? Because otherwise, like Skip, you're going to dump them like a hot potato, and it's you're over, game over.
And I got to tell you, my wife calls me the grumpy old man now, because I'll go to a restaurant. She'll ask me, "Well, how was the sandwich?" I say, "Yeah, it was okay. The beef was a little dry." "That's all you do is complain now, And then the next time I go, "How was the Reuben?" "Oh, it was great." "No, it wasn't." So anyway, honey, don't watch this recording. Anyway, by the way, just out of curiosity, how many people get printed statements and pay their bills online? Okay, that's interesting.
We're in the industry. We have to
Well, yeah, but what's harder is years ago you used to be able to get that bill or statement and look at it. You could almost guess what printer it was put on, because it was perforated on the side and all that stuff. You can't even do that anymore.
The only incentive on some situations where I'm getting printed is when they provided an incentive, discount on something, my bill.
Incentive or
my
punishment?
mobile
Okay, well, let me ask you, what would it take to, for you to go paperless?
Well, a discount. I mean,
Well-
with my AT&T cell plan, I mean, I got a 10% discount on my overall bill.
And that's what took you there?
Paperless, yeah. Otherwise,
Okay.
I'd get printed.
See, I'm AT&T, that, the only thing they offered to do is plant a frickin' tree or something like that. So,
Well, what they did for me is they gave me, like 2,000 miles or something, on my favorite airline
yeah,
for me to, they go paperless and I was click, click, yep.
okay.
$100 a year. That's a pretty big incentive.
And like you said, you didn't get that offer, but I did for some reason.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The topic that you guys were talking about, I think it's pretty good. How can we dissect what are the components of a customer experience so that we could maybe, easy to use, context, am I reaching my objective, I mean, you know what I mean? Sometimes I think that you need a little bit more, get John to, and Gina to give us the analyst point of view. What will be the essential components of a customer experience that is available for us to improve?
Wow.
Go ahead. I'm going last on this one.
It's not 2 o'clock yet.
Classical, the speed of doing the thing, I mean, it's intuitive and, it's easy to execute. Those are the objects. Now,
Right.
from this panel, I expect to,
I think we need to bring up another chair.
Yeah. Do you want to hand it to me? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to actually refer to one of Kevin's slides, which is probably the most important thing. I love it when I see these slides that say, and then we created this beautiful statement with 132 fonts that are so appealing to the eye and blah, blah, blah. The adoption rate is going to be tremendous. You can't know if it's effective if you don't measure it. He had KPIs of measurement. I think that's the very first thing. When you want to dissect stuff, you work with real facts and data, and you say, we're going to do a sample of this type of campaign. So in your case, they gave you a discount. I have been, dreaming about all vendors saying, especially me knowing, I know you're saving money by sending me this electronic. It takes you nothing to do this. How about a little something for the effort? You know what I'm talking about? And we get nothing. And then they're surprised when customers pack up and leave and go someplace else because they were given an incentive. That's real measurable stuff. That's money, that's counting, and that's really where this starts. So that was on Kevin's slide, which is why he wanted to go first. Here.
It was a layup.
hyper-personalization, was that in yours? Kevin, was that in yours? Hyper-personalization?
Oh, that was me. Yeah, that was me.
But it should be measured. That has to be measured.
Right.
I like that term. That could be the next trend.
Hyper, right? Like Opti-channel, right?
I didn't want to try to say it. I was like, copy.
Customer experience has changed. As I look around this room, we have a lot of folks, the majority are 50 or older, really in this room.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa. What are you talking about? You show me a lot.
Not us.
The reality is you tend to find that age in the print and mail world, quite frankly, okay? And so when we try to hire folks and get the young folks excited about our space, they don't get excited about it at all. My question, and let me lay a little background here for this. 50 years ago, if you wanted to make a long distance call, you got an AT&T operator on the phone, and you talked to the operator, and they connected you. And there was an experience change that when the operators went away, there were still people who wanted to have that operator because that was part of their experience they had. 13 years ago, we didn't even have the iPhone. All right, that's how quickly the world has changed right now. And so the whole experience, I remember when I had a phone in my car, okay, attached in the console in the car.
Yep.
My kids would never even think of that today, and they don't even know what the antenna is on the back of the car when you see them driving by. Amazon's come along, and Amazon has changed absolutely everything about the world. And I read an article yesterday that was talking about how they're competing now with UPS, and how they're going to just be a huge threat to UPS on logistics. So here's the question that I have for you as a group. We've talked about a lot of things that are out there, from SMS to email to print and mail to everything else. But what does tomorrow look like? we're even doing in the world of the print and mail side continue to be relevant, or will it be cut off cold turkey because companies will make decisions that it's not of value and they don't want to afford to pay the postage rates, which are the highest piece of it, and they just say, fine, the world's going to adjust the same way when the operators went away from AT&T.
Yes. So, I won't necessarily try to answer what's tomorrow, but what we've seen, and I know certainly talking about the print and mail industry, right? The printed document is still around, but it's not as valuable like we talked about. The value of tomorrow is in kind of what we've highlighted. It is that data, right? So when we talk about the Apple Card, again, they don't have the best rates. It's not the best accounts, things like that, but it's the experience, and it's really driven on the data of that experience. So show me that information in an easier way and a useful way, right? And I think when we talk about, certainly from my perspective in the financial services, is we have all this data that are going on these printed mail statements, right? We have that data. How can we show that data to make it useful for our clients? How can we show the data to make it useful for our customers? And having the ability to search that data, whether it's through chatbots and things like that. Tell me when my statements, or tell me when my bill is due. Make the payment, and just being able to say to Alexa, make the payment with the voice recognition. I think that's the change. It's not necessarily just getting your physical statement in the mail or e-delivered. It's being able to take actions based on the data that's available. And even as a couple years ago, that data was there, but how accessible it was and how flexible it was, I apologize for the IT side, but it was limited, right? So it was there, but try to pull it out and try to use that data to make a better customer experience or better client experience. It was somewhat painful, right? It was a huge project, a lot of cost. So I think the flexibility of how data is accessible will really change how we're engaging with that communication.
Yeah, I think the Apple Card is such a great example of where I get all of that. It's a totally great experience. I don't know if anybody in this room actually has an Apple Card yet. Yeah, so, wasn't that amazing? Right, you go onto your phone, get me the card, and it's on your wallet.
You didn't have to fill out anything?
Within seconds.
Right.
So, but when your physical card comes, the experience continues.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it comes in the package, and you lay your phone next to it, and the card activates. Right, it's tied key to your phone. When you pay your first bill, it says, would you like to pay early? Can you pay? It's all right there on your phone. It's a completely integrated experience with your reporting, your usage, all the way down to the physical card. And if you compare that to any other credit card that comes in the mail, any other credit card experience, it just dwarfs it from a user integration.
It is that, like, you just,
Well, and
you
you
say
know,
you want it,
I
and
had
it's like
taken the
seconds.
card,
It's
I
like,
had
yeah,
taken
you're
the
in.
card out of the package, and it said, go back to the package and took the phone by the package, and the card came, and I'm like, what? So, I did it, I really laid the phone down,
Like,
and
they're
it said,
messing
okay,
with me.
the card is activated, I was like, what the flip is in here?
But just think about the security of that, right? That's a unique package with a unique RFID tied to your phone.
That's right.
Only your phone could have activated that card.
That's crazy.
When was the last time you got a credit card in the mail that was that secure? Right? Look on the card, there's not a single mark on the
Not
card.
a single mark except my
It says
name
your name and it's shipped.
and the chip. We have another question.
So the initial question was, what is the perfect, is there a perfect customer experience, and what is that experience? And like, when I think of that, I think, okay, here, I don't even need to see a bill in the mail. What I want it to do is just, like, for a billing experience, I would rather have it just automatically go, so I don't have to do paper. And then I get a notification that, hey, your bill is being paid or was. And then if I look at it and I look at the amount and I say, that looks a little weird, then I can go to their site, look at it and say, oh, wait a minute, yeah, there is an issue. Or if I look at it and it looks fine, then it becomes a non-event to me. So I didn't have to do anything. I'm handling exceptions. So that, to me, is the perfect customer experience. And so, but not for everybody. So my point of
Yeah,
it
for
is
me,
with-
that would be
exactly.
horrible, because if I saw someone pulling anything out of my bank account without me having positively said, I want this payment made,
So-
then I would be like freaking out.
So when you think,
Yeah.
so when I think of how do you kinds of behaviors and interactions that can happen. It's that, like, the journey mapping thing that nobody really people talk about, but I mean, do they really do it? Do they kind of do it? And it's how those interactions across different channels can, what different kind of paths can people take? And how can you optimize that for all the different kinds of, you could even look at those perfect experiences as being like use cases, and like with my computer geek hat on. And what are all those different kinds of use cases, and how do we enable our customers to be able to achieve those?
So does that bring preference management front and center? Right, so I was at the hotel getting ready to, I was at the hotel to come here, and I haven't traveled in a bit, so I haven't had a need to use Uber. So I, requested a ride here, and there were two questions, and first one was, do you have a temperature preference? I'm not sure, is that a Dallas thing, or? That asked if I had a temperature preference.
I didn't get that either.
So I thought that was interesting, because I know I've gotten in some vehicles, and the AC is blasting, and I'm sitting in the back seat and I'm freezing. So that was the first question, and then the second question was, I think it said, do you have a conversation preference? So in other words, do I prefer to just be quiet or be busy with my phone or a computer or whatever, or do I feel like having a conversation? So maybe that puts preference management front and center. Let the customer define what their preferences are, so I know the optimal experience is, I want the car to be not freezing, because I don't like air conditioning too much because I get cold, and I'm not a chatterbox, so don't talk to me. You might not know that today.
For your phone on airplanes, too.
Yeah.
Well, I figured out AT&T and Uber don't like me. Okay, moving along.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, was the original question, though, beyond that 5 to 13 year range? So I was I heard the question maybe a little bit different than everyone else did. You talked about the exponential change. Yeah, so I'm a little more Star Trek-y, like we're looking 20, 30 years out there. My son just turned 31, so he's the quintessential millennial. His house has all got the smart devices in it and everything else, and it is very natural behavior for him to speak to his house. But seriously, so he's strung this beautiful light set over his, the picnic table on the deck. Hey, Google, turn on the porch lights. And they come on, and this is all now natural. So if we're looking at 5, 10, 20 years, and some of this stuff has already started, so for guys like me who are looking at technology all the time, by the time this stuff comes out, it's already old news. But I visualize, and you guys who have iPhones have Siri, so visualize a 3D holograph of the Siri of your choice, who is with you when you wake up in the morning and goes, John, today you need to pay this bill. It'll be coming to you. Why don't you tell me if you want to do that today? And that's reality. I mean, this stuff is, the bandwidth is so high now and getting even faster that this stuff is reality. And that's what I would see 10 to 20 years, because it's such a natural thing built into the culture. Now we have 2-year-old and 3-year-old kids who walk up to TVs and want to touch and swipe these TVs because they're so used to tablets and devices. It's second nature. Well, yeah, and that is exactly right. So think about our progression as humans. And you just said it, 50 years ago, we loved talking to Marge after she plugged in the 1/4-inch jack to make our call. Some people miss Marge, some people move on. But that's what I'm saying. It's that far out. Everything said here is correct, but now let's get that to this other world that is, we are not envisioning it today, but we see the technology in 3D holographic video conferencing that they've got now. We've got dynamic voice translation into several languages. Everybody has it on their phone now if you have Google Translate. It is a cool world where you can walk up to anyone in your language, just like in Star Trek, and they understand you. I had this experience in Germany once last year. Very cool, and I used the Translate phone. Very natural for me, for the chambermaid who was wanted to change out the room and didn't speak English. I was like, don't come in yet. I'm leaving at 11. And she's telling me in German, I want to change out the bedding. So all of these things will become a natural part of behaving from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep.
And I think, excuse me, like, I'm kind of with Dan here. I want to be able to go into a store, grab a six-pack of beer, and just walk out with it. And their people will call my people and let them know. Right? Yeah. There you go. Facial recognition.
It's called the police. See, I personally think print and mail is going to have a second coming. You laugh. I have a 17-year-old daughter who did her SATs, and every day she gets between 2 and 3 pieces of mail. In fact, if you do print, go after the colleges and universities. These people print a ton of stuff. And she gets 2 or 3 pieces of mail every day from different universities. And then from a cyclical perspective, 6 or 7 weeks, they come in with another piece. Now, if you could see the joy in my daughter's eyes, and I don't think she's an exception to the rule, when she sees her mail, she sees her name on it, and I think that, she's an information overload. She does the FaceTime, she doesn't do Facebook anymore because she told me that's not cool anymore. My parents do Facebook, I don't do Facebook. Yeah, who would have thought? So she don't do Twitter either. But I think that transactional print, I think, is going to take a dive. I think the amount of mail is going to go down, promotional mail and stuff, because we're doing, additional data analytics, AI, all of that type of thing. So instead of sending it out to, 10,000 people, you might be sending it out to 100, 150, but these are people that can afford whatever you're selling. So my personal opinion, and check me out 10 years from now, because I'll be retired by then, hopefully, I think there's going to be a resurgence in certain types of mail.
Including maybe peer-to-peer mail.
Peer-to-peer.
Because people like getting letters, they like getting mail, but they hate sending mail. They have to send it to get it. But if you can take all the pain points out of sending mail, which include putting a piece of paper in an envelope, finding a stamp, writing the addresses, all that stuff is really tedious. And if you could just do away with all that and just have, like, send my friend a letter, and then, they get it, and they'll send me back with it.
There's actually an app now that you
Yes, there
can
is.
take a photo off your phone, type in a message, and it'll send a postcard out.
The military can do that. My nephew just graduated from the Coast Guard boot camp, and that's what you do. There's an app, and you go on and you write the letter, and they send it, and they deliver it to them. I mean, you can print them.
That'd be great for Christmas cards. So,
To John's point, there are college kids right now who have personal assistants that tell them everything they need to do from the minute they wake up in the morning.
Yes.
Okay, and you have a final exam on Thursday, you start studying now? Is that called mom?
and it sounds like their mother's voice, yeah. So,
Well, but then transactional documents are going to be around for a while because what you have driving those is government regulatory things.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
that stuff is going to be a long time before it totally goes away.
And that has to be on paper most of the time. So, yeah.
Somehow, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
A couple things. To your point, I think marking mail will diminish. It's kind of been stagnant, maybe 1% or 2% growth over the last recent years. But technology is driving that. For example, Quad announced that they have an ability to identify through, in essence, AI, the best message to the individual from that standpoint. So all the testing that was done before, do A/B testing to know what the message is, they eliminate a lot of that before a print piece gets created, for example. And that's more relevant. And then with neuroscience and those types of things, you're able to target to the right person with the right message better than ever before. Like Kevin's point, we talked about it several years ago, but now you can actually do it, and then the technology can deliver it. So,
Now the question is, as a service bureau, if you can take somebody from 100,000 pieces of mail because you're sending it to everybody down to 1,000, can you charge 3 times as much, even though you've reduced it 90%?
if I'm a good salesperson,
Okay. That's the answer I was looking for. So, okay. Any other questions? I'd rather you guys ask questions than make comments, quite frankly. Now you're being quiet.
I've got a question. We've been talking about
Okay.
customer experience, but a lot of the conversation,
Should be
a lot of what you read in the media is it's kind of oriented towards B2C, right? So what about B2B companies, and are they spending the kind of resources that we're talking about here to do, digital transformation and customer experience transformation in their environment where they're business to business? I'd be interested to see what you guys thought about that.
So I think some of the B2B stuff we see already with the amount of partnerships with, for instance, I'm going to use Amazon as a thing. So there's B2B and then and target customers through their web stores. Hey, there's a thing we used to hear about all the time in the news that you don't hear anymore, is that the Postal Service is going broke. Thanks, Amazon. How many of you have seen an Amazon delivery on a Sunday through a U.S. postal Jeep? Tons. Interesting turnaround, because you don't hear about the Postal Service going broke anymore. So that's a B2B relationship between Amazon and the Postal Service, obviously, and then the end customer. So interesting things changing along the way. There's one of those things, I don't think I can even predict the future of how that would even begin to change. I got nothing. It's getting near 2 o'clock. I'm going to go into my food coma in a second.
No thoughts? Anything? Any questions? You're going to make me come up with another question, aren't you? So, okay, if I must. Okay. Gina, you talked about some of the objections. I won't call on you yet. Okay. He's going to go first. So. Okay, you talked about some of the objections to implementing CCM, CX strategy transformations, and that type of thing. Now I've got an analyst, I've got a service bureau, and I've got a vendor. You walk into that environment, how do you counter those objections? I mean, you mentioned, where was it? What's the cost of not changing? And if I was a end user and I was sitting there and you said, what's the cost of not changing? I would say, is that all you got? Convince me, why do I need to do this? Any thoughts? Who wants to go first? Oh, yeah. I already committed you.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about the cost of not changing, typically when we go in to meet with the providers and our clients, if we're meeting at the C-suite, going in and explaining where tomorrow is going to be, right, and talk about the future capabilities and showing them where they are today, putting aside the cost component for a second, it usually really does open up their eyes. Most of those companies still doing it in-house, or if they're with another provider, they've been with them for 20-some years. So when you go in and say, here's where you are today, here's where we see the market going tomorrow, you tell me what your cost to get to that at some point is going to be. Do you want to continue to wait? That's usually when you start adding it up. And then you start talking about the customer journey and the customer experience is the impact of your customer and all the rates and trends that we've seen of how quickly people will leave. The one stat was 81% think they compete basically only on customer experience. So if your customer experience isn't a top-notch and a priority of your clients, you're going to lose business real quick. And you'll see all the different disruptors in the space. We talk about Apple, Amazon, firms that we never, and some of us in here never thought we would be partnering with or competing against. And they're coming in saying, we got it. We can deliver a more cost-effective and a better experience. So the cost of change and being the disruptor in the market, if you're not on the cutting edge of that, it's going to create problems down the road.
So I'll go to the crying Nokia guy, if you remember that slide. When you think about the iPhone, they weren't the first to invent any of that stuff. So Nokia was really early on that stuff. And what happened is it's a combination of technology that they put into a pretty package. They created a saying that says, think different with your iPhone, iPad, and now billions of people are thinking differently, as you can see. But the point behind that is understanding whether you're providing a product or service, with what you're providing, are you getting to a point of parity with your competition? Or are you trying to take a step ahead of them? And you have to choose those business decisions wisely based on data. So when you talk about the loss of customers, analyze why you're losing them. Is it because you don't have parity with your competitors? Okay, cool. Let's get to parity and then figure out the other niche that takes us up into a new market and market leadership. So I think it's, and this, because of how fast everything is moving these days, has to be an ongoing exercise by product management, business analysts, those type of things.
I mean, I think, so the question was really around how do you sort of get around the naysayers, right? Right. And I think it's, sometimes I think it's the proof is just really in the numbers, right? If you can get the numbers down on paper and let people understand this is the cost of doing nothing, this is where you are today, this is what you're spending today, but if you decide to stay with that and not do anything, there's a different cost, right? There's the actual hard dollar cost, there's the opportunity cost, there's the cost of risk. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into that whole scenario that just have to be weighed out. And you cross your fingers and hope people jump on board. But it's it's tough. The example I used with the insurance company who had the various lines of business presidents, and if they didn't want to outsource their print because they felt like their documents were fine, that blows the whole business case, right? So it's trying to get everybody on board, corralling everybody. It's almost like herding cats, but if you have that one champion, like you also talked about, right, that can kind of push through all the red tape and say, listen, this is the direction that we're going to go in. You either jump on board or maybe we can find somebody else who will jump. I mean, I hate to be the the bad guy, but sometimes it's what did you say, by fear, right? So if you're unwilling to jump on board, then maybe we find somebody who is willing to. So. And
some of the stats you talk about Nokia, but you think about Uber with New York City taxi cab services plummeted. The medallion plummeted. You talk about Blockbuster, right? They said, oh, we own this. Nobody does it. Great. Literally nobody does this anymore because somebody else came in.
They have one store.
They have one store in, is it Seattle? Utah? Yeah. So the disruption, and then from the financial services, we talk about outsourcing and acquisitions, is the percentages of people getting acquired. Unless you're one of the top guys, there's a chance. So you better streamline and optimize now, or you're ripe for the acquisition.
I think one of the other things that a lot of the people don't realize is the liability. If you outsource, you are also passing along a lot of the work, the liability, and everything else. You don't wash your hands of it, but you certainly get people that are a lot more capable of doing it.
One of the things that I've seen, so when you look at doing this and you look at all of the analysis work that needs to be done up front, and so you say, well, what is you can look at two sides of it. What is the cost of doing nothing? It's hard to quantify a lot of those, because the numbers are a little bit squishy. You're trying to get to, opportunity cost and all these other things, and people are, it's hard to quantify those numbers, and it's hard to stand behind those and validate them later. Yeah, if you don't do this, people are not going to like it, and that's going to cost you a lot. And so those are harder numbers to get to. So usually people go for the ROI numbers. The amount of analysis necessary to do the stuff that you were talking about there is massive. And I know I've been involved with projects with Gina, I think, where we did some of that work for shared customers, and it's a mountain of work and analysis. And what you wind up with at the end of it is end up with, if you really want to, at an enterprise level, to fix it, whatever, that means, to get to, nirvana, it's going to take many years, and it's going to cost not just all of this money, but it's going to cost all this time, and you're going to have to throw a lot of bodies at it. It's a pretty, and so how do you deal with the customer who just says, you know what, the doing nothing, this is so hard. It's so hard. doing nothing is the easiest thing for me to do. And God, let me see, I retire in like 7 years, man. I can make it. I can make it. You know, I mean, that is a totally realistic scenario out there, I think.
Yeah, no, it's true. And when we talk about the cost side of it too, it's, you know, every time we've looked at for outsourcing capabilities, it always ends up in, you can put your numbers wherever you want to put your numbers. Hey, you're spending X. It's like, oh, no, we're not. We're spending a lot less. Okay, but what about your infrastructure, your technology, the overhead, all of that other stuff? It's really depending on how the customer wants to actually view those numbers. But yeah, I mean, numbers can be misinformed at times, I'll say. So.
Everybody say bye to Gina. Bye, Gina.
She said no preference on the temperature.
She showed me.
Yeah, in the comment field, tell them Skip's upset.
So I wanted to add something to what you just said. Sometimes it's not just money. Like I was saying, my experience with Greece, people are they're upset all the time. They want a work-life balance, but they don't really have one, but you have to chase top down. They just don't realize the people down here, you don't have a work-life balance because you're being overworked because you got all this stuff going on that needs to be fixed. So nobody has no idea because they have so many different lines of business how to come together.
Yeah, and that's what we usually go in with some of the user testing beforehand and say, hey, here's some of the feedback from your clients. Now, the internal side's a little different, but here's some of the feedback. So before you tell us that your communication's awesome, here's the feedback we've heard. Before you tell us that we've just did a redesign, okay, but your feedback isn't where you should probably expect it. Now, granted, it's all dependent on how you ask the question. I'm a Dunkin' Donuts guy. You know, I use the app all the time for my coffee, and it pops up and says, how's your experience? Is it great? Just yes or no, right? So I'll say yes because I hit the same order every single time and find a Dunkin' spot. But their feedback is everybody's thrilled. And if you didn't answer, you're somewhere below it's a great experience. But it doesn't necessarily say, you know, this sucks or this is awful. So it's getting that feedback up front from a consulting perspective is huge because then you can really put it back, putting aside the numbers, you can kind of go back to and say, is this what you expected or what you were thinking when you did this redesign, this upgraded communication?
How do you get to an improved or excellent customer experience without surveying your customers to death? I mean, I go buy a ream of paper at Staples and they send me an email that says, how was your experience? It's like, I bought a ream of paper. I don't need to answer, a 6-question survey about whether, how nice the clerk was or and not every single time. And it's just, I don't know, how do you get, I feel like I get like 8 surveys in my email every day, and it's like, how, I understand where people are trying to get to, but it's like, I also, like, I don't really want to answer your questions.
Yeah. I have an example from the real world, not the document world, but maybe that's a clue. I think that the owners of any particular company or business have to be blind or eyes wide open, honest with themselves about that customer experience. And I'm going to give you a real world example. A friend of mine opened up a restaurant. He used to be a chef in New York City. He moved to a small seaside town in Connecticut, thought he would offer gourmet meals that he was used to serving up in New York City. And his business began to fail, but on the side, he also made bagels that were spot-on New York bagels. And people were beating a path to his door to make these bagels. People were asking him to pre-make the bagels so that they could put them in the train stations. And his business completely shifted over from doing gourmet food to just bagels. How did that happen? Well, I'm sure he was sitting there looking at the bank account going, crap, I'm broke. This sucks. And then the second part was, but wait, look at all these bagels we've been selling, and we have people requesting more. So I have to say, in his case, he was just honest to himself to say, this is the state of my business, and notice the positive things that going on around him and make those changes.
Business-to-consumer companies spend billions of dollars trying to create demand for products, right? They've been doing it for years on TV commercials and magazine ads and all kinds of stuff like that. And that's how they market their services and their goods, is by creating World Insurance Report, I think 2 years ago by CAPV, said that something like 63% of insurance company CEOs felt that they were delivering a good customer experience. But according to CAPV, only 8% of their customers agree. So you can't account for that discrepancy without, and I may have the numbers slightly wrong, but it's about that, okay? It was a long time ago, but I remember being really startled by it and thinking a lot of times what we need to do in this industry is create a sense of demand in people. There is no incentive to change something that works, and if something basically works, then there's no incentive to change it. Saying you may someday fall behind and look at the Nokia guy, you know, that's possible. But there's also a good bet that you won't be.
And if the problem is so hard to solve, then people just throw up their hands. So what we need to do as an industry is we need to make an easy button somehow for people to get to do it. You know, come up with some way that they can get because they know what they should be doing. You know?
So, do people in this room know the term transpromo? Okay, most people do. So 20 years ago or so, I think transpromo was probably the fifth word out of my mouth on any given day. And we were doing a panel like this at Xplor, and I was up there answering questions, and we were talking about transpromo. And we're walking out of the room, and this woman turns to another woman and says, "What the hell is transpromo?" So you know, we just it's hard to get things to penetrate, and we're not doing a great job as an industry. If there is a CCM industry, and I don't actually believe that there is. We're going to an insurance show in Toronto next week, and I guarantee you that most of those insurance companies have no idea that they build documents. Is that important in insurance? You better hope not.
You know, to the point that Kevin made earlier, you know, as a consultant, I think that you guys have a unique situation. And I think that context is something that if a consultant is able to define, would help with scope creep, help with goals, objectives, what you want to get out of this. And then the example that I have to illustrate that is a company called Dow Jones. We were competing with the whole world. And apparently everybody assumed that they knew what was Dow Jones' problem. And nobody really get there and say, hey, exactly what it is that you're trying to do. And we found out that 60% of their revenue comes from bettors in Asia. People who bet on anything and everything. And because of their culture, yeah. And they said, well, we provide information for these people, and they're 60% of our revenue, but there's a little cultural trick. And I said, what do you mean cultural trick? You know, they bet. If the horse wins, they make the money. If they don't, they lose. No. They only believe on English written text if the kanji equivalent is side by side in the same piece of paper. And as you know, character sets are not something easy for you to mix in the same paper. And that became the straw that broke the mythical, camel's back. Because everything else, everybody was able to position, to say, and all that. So I think that as a consultant, you probably live this more than most people, that exactly what it is that I'm here for, and how am I going to help you in so many words, right? So give us a little bit of your experience on that, because now AI, machine learning, and other technologies are working toward being able to define context from semantic analysis, from situational analysis, so that way they hope to reduce the number of steps to communicate, reduce the number of words that we could use because we have the same similar language, ontology, semantic, and all that, by defining and creating consensus around the context, which is something that you're talking about.
Yeah, so in complete honesty, I'm not on our consulting team. So I'm in our sales and account management side, but that's one of, the offerings that we have. And I think it sounds oversimplified, but just asking our clients, hey, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? It's, and we've gone in and we've made the mistake as well. We're like, this is what everybody else is doing, and this is how you can streamline your platform, and this is how you can handle your data. And some of it sounds awesome, and some of our clients get, jazzed up about it, and it's awesome, and they're ready to sign somewhere. But on the flip side, they're not even sure what they're signing up for. And it's just like, let's take a step back. Let's just ask, what are you looking to accomplish? If it's just straight save money, tell us, right? If that's what you're looking to do, fine. If you've grown through acquisition and you have so many platforms now, and you're trying to address that need because you're going to continue to grow, that's fine too. It's just going to the table and just saying, before we do anything, before we even do our Broadridge overviews and all that kind of stuff, we just say, what are you looking to accomplish today, right? And what's your end goal? And we always do put in, what's the timing of the end goal? Because I think that's usually, next month. And we're like, great, you could do everything, there's no chance. I don't think anybody can do it next month, but go ahead and find somebody else, kind of thing. So for me, it's really just simplifying the process. And then I let some of, people like Gina and our side, we have Matt Swain, who's very involved with Xplor. Then we bring in some of more of the technical side within our consulting and our IT teams and really get into the details. But understanding what their needs are up front, it sounds so easy, but it's something I think we often overlook.
Yeah, I think it's a really complicated question, and we're looking for a simple answer, and it's not there. So if you, from the northwestern part of the United States, where there's a high mix of Asian population, they'll take demographics, location, neighborhoods, look at the surname, and they'll print that in both Chinese, Japanese, and English side by side, because they know there's a high likelihood that document needs to be read in one of those languages. But not so much for Middle America. In Quebec, always, because it's a mandate, both French and English. In France, screw the world, it's only in French. I mean, so it's a combination of understanding the world you're in, and I would imagine someone complained in the Northwest that they couldn't read their phone bill. That's why they didn't pay it, and the result was that they put it in multiple language fonts. It came out of some need. Somebody just didn't go off and say, multiple languages on Wednesday, let's do it, So I think it happened out of need.
Sexy, so to speak. Yep. All right. In some of the consulting engagements you're in, are you hearing more from people that, I want to be able to build and manage my own documents through self-service? I don't want to become reliant on somebody to do that.
Yeah, a lot of when Gina was talking about some of the CCM, the entire landscape, the platforms that are available, we do hear that come up a lot. We also, from a Broadridge perspective, are always looking at that as well. I'm not sure one size fits all for all the needs, but it is it comes up every time. There's different components and plugins that you can do for it, but when we talk about the specific market for CCM, most of our clients are looking for like, hey, this covers everything. I go buy this and it fixes it, and unfortunately, it's probably not that easy, but it has come up a lot. Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions? We've got about 6 minutes. Want me to ask another question?
I'm going to say no, but
Hold on, Scott.
I don't know.
I'm going to ask a question,
Okay.
and Carlin will support me on this one. How many of you are looking at getting your EDP certification? EDP. How many even know what EDP is? Okay. EDP, Electronic Document Professional. It's a certification associated with Xplor. if you've been in the industry for at least 5 years, you submit a portfolio of work examples that shows you understand the industry, and you can get certified. And I think we haven't been promoting it as much as we should, so I'm gonna
Glad you brought it.
put my little plug in here and say, if you're in this room, you've probably been coming to Xplor for a while, you've probably been how many of you have been in the industry at least 5 years? Okay. Go out on the Xplor website, look up EDP, and you can see the qualifications, and I would encourage all of you to get certified, and maybe by next April, we'll see you going across the stage and accepting your EDP certification. And if you need help, if you're in this area, Carlin and I are both in this area. We'll gladly mentor you if you need help getting through the paperwork.
Or the portfolio.
Or to build your portfolio.
And by the way, if you're in sales and you say, I don't need this, that's not true. When I was technical, then I got into sales, and I had gotten my EDP. And when I was a technical guy, everybody went, he knows what he's talking about because he's the technical guy. But then when you become a salesperson, it's like, it's a salesperson. Yeah. But when I had that EDP, people would go, well, what's EDP? And then you explain to them what it was, and it was like instant credibility. So anyway.
Yeah, and if you're in the consulting side of things, it can help, establish your credibility in the industry.
Yeah, one of our vendors has 110 EDPs, 60 or 70 EDAs. There's an EDA also.
Associate.
Which is
The
different
people who've only had
Under 5
two,
years, it's 5.
yeah, 2 to 5 years, so
Associates first and then.
associate first and then,
But you can do EDP.
you can do
Out of
EDP
the
without
gate.
the associate.
Yeah.
You can jump right in if you've got 5 years, but if you
We
just
got it
a
all on the
couple years.
website, so you can go out there. Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you, 2/3 of our panel